Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling a question that, it has massive implications for public health, for personal connection, and just overall happiness.
Right.
And that question is, how crucial is a satisfying sexual life for our true well-being?
And we're not just going off pop psychology here.
No outdated assumptions. We're cutting straight to the evidence.
And that evidence it's robust. We pulled from a whole stack of sources for you today, and we're centering on a major systematic review. This one was published in the WHO Bulletin.
Okay, so a big one.
A very big one. It synthesized 63 studies across 5 different global regions, and the finding is pretty unequivocal.
Yeah.
There's a definitive link between positive sexual health and better overall health.
But the key here, and I think this is where we need to start, is defining the goalposts. When we talk about sexual health, we aren't just talking about function, are we?
Not at all. The World Health Organization definition is actually, it's incredibly holistic. They call it a state of physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being in relation to sexuality.
That's the crucial pivot right there.
It is. It's not just the absence of disease or dysfunction. It's about achieving a positive state.
Right.
And this is really important. The WHO explicitly calls sexual pleasure a core component of overall well-being. And that framing, it really informs everything we are about to discuss.
So our mission today is to unpack that hard evidence. The stuff showing the connection to lower depression, higher quality of life.
And then we get into the messy part.
And then, we have to deal with the messy reality of quantity. We're deep diving into the surprising data on frequency to find out where more sex stops being a good thing. And maybe, most importantly, what researchers admitted they consistently failed to measure.
So let's start with that foundation.
Yeah.
The systematic review confirmed that the link between positive sexual health indicators and better well-being is consistent right across the board.
And this wasn't a narrow demographic.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It included older adults, pregnant women, people in same-sex and mixed-sex couples. It really confirms that the benefits are, they seem to be universal. They span the entire human lifespan.
It's powerful to see that universality in the data. What specifically stood out about the psychological impact? Because that seems to be where the correlation is just rock solid.
Absolutely. Think of sexual health as a kind of protective mental shield.
Okay.
The research showed that positive indicators, so we're talking high sexual function, deep satisfaction, were significantly and consistently linked to lower scores in depression and anxiety.
So it's not just that happier people have more sex.
No, the data suggests it's a two-way street. For women, this effect was seen across multiple different function domains, so it's not just one thing.
It's that a satisfying sexual life actively helps fortify the mind against, serious mental distress.
That's the interpretation the data supports.
Yeah.
And the impact, it goes beyond the individual, too. There was one really compelling couple study that showed a wife's sexual satisfaction correlated negatively, not just with her own depression scores,
but with her partners as well.
but also with her partner's scores.
Yeah.
It acts like a shared psychological resource inside the relationship.
That makes a lot of sense. Mutual satisfying connection builds up the whole relationship, which is just a giant buffer against stress.
Exactly.
So what about the physical realm then, beyond the psychological?
Well, we see sexual health just woven into overall quality of life, or QL, impacting psychological, environmental, and social domains.
Right.
But on the specific physical side, some of the findings are fascinating.
Give us an example.
Okay, so for postmenopausal women, researchers found that sexual desire was linked to greater vitality, and that arousal and orgasm were specifically linked to a lower experience of physical pain.
Wow. Wait, so how does that work?
The sources suggest it's likely due to the effect of sexual hormones and neurotransmitters on pain perception. It acts like a natural analgesic.
A natural painkiller, just from arousal and engagement. So are we talking something comparable to, say, a low-dose pain medication? Or is it more like a mood boost that makes you forget the pain?
It seems to be more than just mood. The hormonal and neurological response is significant enough that it's actually impacting how the body interprets pain signals.
That's incredible.
And we also saw that positive sexuality outcomes were associated with a better prognosis, so better health outcomes and longer life expectancy among diabetic patients.
Okay.
And for men, good erectile and orgasmic function was clearly associated with a higher overall quality of life.
Yeah.
The data just leaves no room for doubt. Sexual health is interwoven with your total systemic health.
Understood. Okay, so now let's unpack this next critical shift. Because if sex is so fundamentally good for us,
The logic would be.
shouldn't we be aiming for a maximum daily dose? And this is where that simple more is better rule just completely falls apart.
It really does.
We have very specific data on frequency, starting with one clear application: fertility.
Right, if conception is the goal, then yeah, increasing frequency can be highly beneficial, specifically for improving sperm quality.
Okay.
An Australian study focused on men with higher than normal sperm DNA damage, which is a huge barrier to conception, and found that daily ejaculation for just 7 days significantly improved their sperm quality.
How significant was the improvement they saw?
It was pretty dramatic. Out of the men whose sperm quality improved, and that was 81% of the guys in the trial, they saw an average, get this, a 12% decrease in DNA damage
12% in just a week.
in a week.
Yeah.
And the science behind it is pretty elegant. Daily ejaculation reduces the sperm's exposure to reactive oxygen species in the testicular ducts.
So it's basically cycling the sperm out faster before they can get damaged.
Exactly. You're preventing the damage that accumulates when they're just in storage.
Okay, so that is a clear, quantifiable benefit for a very focused goal. But now we bring in the immune system. And this is where we see the first major curveball, this idea of diminishing returns.
Indeed. When researchers looked at the immune system, they found a sweet spot.
A sweet spot.
Yeah. Regular sexual activity, specifically once or twice a week, correlated with significantly higher levels of immunoglobulin A, or IgA.
And IgA is an antibody, right?
It's a critical antibody. It's your first line of defense. It boosts immunity, helps protect you from getting sick.
That sounds like a clear, positive correlation. More sex, better immunity. But what happens if you push that envelope, say 3 or 4 times a week?
That's the twist. That higher frequency actually eliminated the immune improvement.
It went away.
It just vanished.
Yeah.
The prevailing hypothesis is that either the body enters an immunosuppressant state from physical exhaustion, or it just depletes the necessary resources too quickly. When sex becomes too frequent, you might actually be undermining your immune gains.
So your body needs recovery time, even from something that's supposed to be good for it. You're trading immune strength for exhaustion.
Sight.
And if that wasn't counterintuitive enough, we saw some. I mean, truly head-scratching, non-linear findings when it came to frequency and prostate cancer risk in men.
Oh, this one is bizarre. The study showed a kind of U-shaped curve for prostate cancer risk.
A U-shape.
Yeah. The lowest risk was found in men who ejaculated either less than 3 times or more than 21 times per month.
Wait, less than 3 or more than 21.
Correct. The guys in the middle range had a comparatively higher risk.
That is absolutely not what you would predict. That suggests 2 completely different biological mechanisms are at play at the low and high ends. It defies any simple linear explanation.
It does. It just highlights how complex the whole endocrine system is, and it certainly refutes any kind of universal prescription for frequency.
Okay, before we get totally lost in chemistry, let's just touch on the most basic metric people use for exercise: calories.
Ah, yes.
We know sex is moderate physical activity, but how much does it actually count for?
It contributes moderately. A typical 30-minute session can burn around 90 calories for women and up to 120 for men.
So, kind of like a brisk 15-minute jog.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely a healthier way to get the heart rate up than, say, sitting in traffic.
And for those of you trying to maximize that workout, because someone always asks, the position matters.
Of course it does.
We saw that the woman on top position, the cowgirl, can burn up to 135 calories in 30 minutes for the woman, which is a solid contribution.
While the missionary position's a little more relaxed on the exertion front. About 14 calories for women and maybe 47 for men in a 10-minute session.
Good to know. It's moderate exercise, but let's be honest, it's rarely the main motivation.
Right.
And that brings us perfectly to the core emotional warning sign we saw in the data, the pitfalls of making frequency a performance goal.
Exactly. Because correlational studies have always told us happy couples have more sex. So the obvious leap is, if I force more sex, I'll be happier.
Right. That's the assumption that these Carnegie Mellon researchers wanted to test experimentally.
Yes, they did.
So they took couples and randomly told one group to double their sexual frequency for 90 days.
They needed to establish causation, not just correlation. They wanted to know if the act of increasing frequency itself would lead to a happiness boost.
And the result was?
A definitive failure. They found absolutely no increase in happiness among the couples who doubled their frequency.
Wow. So they forced it, they doubled the frequency, and felt no better. If quantity doesn't drive happiness, what does this tell you about how to prioritize your time and energy?
It tells you that habituation and obligation are happiness killers. The researchers suggested the reason for the failure was that forcing the increase. Well, it led to a decline in the wanting and the enjoyment of sex.
It turned it into a chore.
When a joyful activity is turned into mandatory homework, the positive psychological returns they vanish.
That is a perfect segue to defining this concept of sexual burnout.
Sexual burnout is a critical concept here. It's defined as a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion that's related to your sexual life.
And how does that show up?
It manifests as a persistent lack of interest, feelings of dread associated with the activity, or just a profound emotional disconnection.
It sounds like the complete inverse of the positive sexual health we were championing at the top of this deep dive.
It is.
And the causes aren't just relationship fatigue, are they?
No, they're multifaceted. I mean, while psychological causes are big, repetitive, routine, performance pressure, we have to acknowledge the physical and pharmacological causes.
Like what?
This can be linked to hormonal imbalances, chronic illness, and, as some sources noted, side effects of common medications like SSRIs or ADHD medications. If the desire just isn't there, forcing the frequency is a direct path to burnout.
And we also have to talk about the physical cost of overexertion, which goes beyond just being tired.
Absolutely. Excessive frequency risks general physical exhaustion, muscle strain. For women, it significantly increases the risk of friction-related irritation, small cuts, infections, especially UTIs, as the bacterial introduction frequency goes up.
And for men, the risk of serious acute trauma seems to spike with overexertion.
Yes. While daily sex itself doesn't cause chronic dysfunction, the physical fatigue can temporarily reduce erection quality. But more seriously, excessive activity increases the risk of trauma, including penile fracture, often from aggressive movements in awkward positions.
Oh, wow.
The study specifically noted that the woman on top position increases this particular risk compared to others. The body just needs recovery time to avoid injury.
And the ultimate relational trap here is that focusing only on high frequency turns sex into an obligation.
Rather than a mutual desire.
Exactly. And that dynamic breeds resentment, frustration, and it totally neglects the other critical forms of intimacy that actually drive satisfaction, like deep conversation, non-sexual touch, shared vulnerability.
When it becomes a metric you have to hit, it stops being a source of pleasure and well-being.
Which brings us to maybe the most insightful and frankly shocking conclusion from that whole systematic review. What the researchers themselves admitted they consistently failed to measure.
This is truly the most revealing part of the entire project. The authors of the review noted that across all 63 studies, the vast majority focused almost entirely on sexual function, meaning they were only measuring sexual health by the absence of dysfunction or infirmity. They criticized this narrow view for completely missing the core positive dimensions that the WHO defined.
So after decades of scientific investigation into sexual health, the research community was largely just measuring whether the parts worked, not whether the experience was meaningful or positive.
Pretty much.
What were the two absolutely fundamental components they flagged as missing from almost all the assessment tools?
First, sexual pleasure. It was often completely absent from the assessment tools, despite the WHO defining it as a crucial component of sexual health. Researchers were measuring performance, but not enjoyment.
Okay, that's a big miss. What was the second?
The second, and this one is truly astonishing, was consent.
Consent.
Few of the included studies explicitly measured whether the sexual activities being assessed were fully consensual, which is it's fundamental to defining health in this context.
That is genuinely baffling. That in a massive systematic review on human well-being, the foundational element of mutual consent wasn't routinely tracked, documented, or even asked about.
I know.
That profoundly limits the conclusions we can draw about the quality of the interactions being studied.
It does. It underscores a bias in medical research toward pathology over positivity. The science confirms that positive sexual health drives well-being, but the optimal approach is less about hitting an arbitrary number and entirely about quality and intentionality.
So the key is?
The key is mutual consent, open communication about desires, and prioritizing that emotional connection over sheer function or frequency.
That brings us to the end of this deep dive. We've established that sexual health is a powerful driver of overall well-being. It significantly lowers mental distress, boosts quality of life. We learned that frequency can be optimized for specific goals, like daily for fertility, or 1 to 2 times a week for that immune system bump. But that chasing high quantity can actively lead to burnout, dissatisfaction, and even physical strain.
Which leaves you with one final provocative thought.
If
If decades of rigorous research focused almost exclusively on measuring dysfunction and biological function, but routinely failed to measure the fundamentals of mutual consent and sexual pleasure, how accurate were those studies truly in capturing the full scope of the human sexual experience? The ultimate deep dive into your own sexual health should start not with metrics or obligations, but with authentic desire and mutual joy.